morning, everyone. Welcome to the Municipal Boards Committee meeting. I am going to introduce a few recommendations. Are you getting as much feedback as I am? Oh, there's better. No, I'm not. Sarah, are you saying you're getting a lot of feedback?
I was, but it's better now.
Okay.
Commissioner, we had an open loop, so I turned off the mayor's mic and Palmer's mic, so you should not have the feedback anymore.
Great, thank you, Kevin. So I'm going to take the first recommendation separately, just because there are three applicants that we've been looking at, and this one is for the Zoning Board of Adjustments and Appeals. This recommendation is from Matthew Lyons to appoint Tunisia Mayweather and Zach Miller to a 3-year terms as regular members beginning December 1st, 2020.
I can't hear Stephanie.
November 30th, 2023. Kelly, you're having trouble hearing?
Kelly, can you hear me?
Can you hear me, Kelly? No.
Doesn't seem like she can hear anybody.
So we'll stand by until she gets fixed. And Alex can go that way. That'd be great.
I can hear now.
Wait, can you hear now?
I can. I apologize. I don't know. It just quit working.
Okay. All right. So I'll just repeat that for Kelly's sake. We have 2 recommendations from Matthew Lyons for the Zoning Board of Adjustment and Appeals to appoint Tunisia Mayweather and Zach Miller to 3-year terms as regular members beginning December 1st, 2020 and ending November 30th, 2023. And then there is a recommendation to appoint Brandon Peterson to a 3-year term as an alternate beginning December 1st, 2020 and ending November 30th, 2023. And I would entertain a motion to go ahead and accept these recommendations for the Zoning Board of Adjustments and Appeals.
Move to approve the Zoning Board of Adjustments and Appeals nominations.
It's mine. Is this mine? I forget which committee I'm on real estate of this.
Yes, you're this.
I'm sorry. Then I'm seconding.
We love your second. Okay, and as a discussion point, Kelly Coos might be the one I'm asking, or anyone else who might know the answer. You know, could you describe the actual alternate position for the group? You know, we've probably appointed alternates before, but I just saw this and noted it and didn't feel like I had a command knowledge of what an alternate does. Do they go to all the meetings? Do they only go if someone is, you know, no longer able to fulfill their board, you know, or committee position? It looks like it's a 3-year term, like the regular members, but Kelly, do you have more information on that alternate position?
Yes, they started implementing alternates because they were having attendance issues at some meetings. They also have alternates on the Code Enforcement Board. We don't count the alternate position towards their 2-term limit because they don't often participate and vote in every meeting. But they are available to cover, to help meet a quorum. And usually when someone resigns or terms out, that staff person recommends that alternate move up to a permanent position.
Okay, and do they have the expectation that they are attending every meeting or only when there's an absence?
That part I don't know. I don't know. Code enforcement and ZBA, I don't know if they attend the meeting or if they just come when they're called because they know someone's going to be absent. Jim or Brandy would need to answer, unless Teresa knows.
They do not typically attend the meetings unless they're advised that there's going to be members absent. We have had alternates that attended before. With respect to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, an alternate is particularly important because the Land Development Code requires the vote of 5 members to approve a variance. So, I mean, that, you know, the quorum is particularly tenuous with respect to that board.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great. So I just wanted that to be a point of conversation. Are there any other comments before voting?
I have a question, Stephanie. Are they all three new to the board, or are they returning?
I think they're all three. Well, I know Tanisha and Zach. Yeah, I think all three, when I read the applications, were new. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly.
Okay.
So I was excited about that actually because it looked like Zach Miller had interest in several boards, and same with Tanisha Mayweather and Brandon Peterson. So when it looked like they had hopefully listened to our call for action and submitted applications with interest.
They are new. Debbie would mark them as a reappoint if they were being reappointed.
Okay. And
That's
so we're not appointing someone who has served as an alternate before. I was just clarifying that since Palmer just brought that up. Okay.
I can
I think
look it up and send you a message.
okay. I think it's great too, Stephanie, that we have new people that want to be involved and serving on these boards, and it's so important to constantly, have some new people involved. So I was excited to read all their names, and I read a little bit through the other attachments that were sent. I just couldn't tell. Thank you, Kelly.
Great. So we have a motion to approve Tanisha Mayweather, Zach Miller as regular term members for 3 years, and then also Brandon Peterson as an alternate. All in favor of that? Any opposed? Motion carries. We have two more recommendations that won't maybe have as much discussion. One is a recommendation from Sean Shiraz to reappoint Kyle Davis and Christopher Hammond to 4-year terms beginning December 17th, 2020, ending December 16th, 2024, to the Fire Pension Board. I see that nice denotation, Kelly, of reappointing, so we know that they have been on the board. And then also on the Housing Authority Board, there's a recommendation from Mayor Bill Mutz to appoint Don Brown to a 4-year term beginning December 3rd, 2020 and ending December 2nd, 2024. So it looks like he is new to this board. Is there a motion?
To approve both. And so
Great.
second.
Great. We have a motion and a second from Commissioner McCarley. Is there any conversation with regard to these recommendations? Seeing none, we will go ahead and vote. All in favor of these appointments? You can raise your hand. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Well, congratulations to those new and reappointed members to our municipal board committees. And as an informational item, the city clerk announced that the employees elected representatives to the pension board and the Civil Service Board. And Derek Peck will serve a 3-year term on the Civil Service Board beginning January 1st, 2021. And Tori Bombard will serve a 3-year term on the Pension Board beginning January 1st, 2021. So we're thrilled that they will be serving in those positions. And that is all I have unless there is any other business before this committee. Seeing none, meeting adjourned.
That brings us to the Real Estate and Transportation Committee and our chairman, Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. I am sorry to say that we do not have a quorum today. Commissioner Walker and Franklin are absent and out of town for some reason, and our meeting has been rescheduled for Monday. And so at that point, we will address our issues. I do have one question of Mr. Davis, if I may. Do you know why number 4 was scrapped from our agenda?
Yes, there's an associated item with that to award the RFP to construct that building that the lease is going to be for. And that was not ready to go yet. So we decided to go ahead and delay this one as well so they can be heard at the same time. I'll probably come back before you on the 21st.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right.
We're done. So.
All right, so at this point in time, we can go ahead with our agenda setting because we're past 8:30. And so we'll take a look at the agenda for our meeting on Monday at 3 o'clock. We will have an opening presentation from Jeff Stearns, who does an incredible job for the city on pooled investments, and get an update on that. We'll look at the reaccreditation award from the Commission for law enforcement agencies, which is great news to see happening. And then we will have our beautification awards. There are no proclamations. We'll cover the 2 committee meetings results at that time because we'll have had the real estate committee by then. And so that will take us to item 1. Should we wait to review item 1, Mr. Davis, or do those now, 1 through 3, or do those now since they're...
You talk about the real estate items?
Yes.
I'd probably be better to wait until 2 o'clock on Monday. That's when it's
Okay.
okay.
All right, so that brings us to consent, and you'll see we have both the minutes as well as a miscellaneous report at C1, 6C1, and as the only 2 items. So why don't we go to 6C1 on the memo regarding 501(p) hearing waiver.
Thank you. We have a land use item, an amendment to the comprehensive plan coming up, and because of the nature of that particular amendment, it's going to require 2 public hearings, and the statute says that one of those has to occur after 5 p.m. unless the city commission waives that requirement by a majority plus 1 vote. So this is something that the commission does from time to time to waive that requirement and hold the hearing at the commission's regularly scheduled time. I believe you're muted.
I was county commissioner, so there's 4 of us here, so actually we can choose to waive that and leave it on consent because there are 4 of us if you want to do that. Leave it on consent.
Action today. That'll be something you take action on Monday.
All right, but leaving it on consent makes it's just where we place it is all I was trying to clarify. Okay, so we're gonna leave it on consent along with the minutes. There are no requests here from the general public equalization hearing, so let's talk about that, sir.
Sure, just a lot of the same names again on this particular equalization role. I know there's been some discussion about making sure that the members of the public that are there for the equalization hearing are aware that that's their time to speak. And one idea that has been proposed is possibly putting the list of the names and addresses that are on the roll on the overhead screen so that the members sitting out in the audience can see that and maybe just scroll through that list. So if that is something the commission is interested in, I believe that Kevin said that he can make that happen on Monday. Just kind of slow things down just a little bit so that people know what's going on.
Good. I think we're all pretty much in favor. Commissioner McLeod, you as well? Okay, because it's just a lot. We've missed them a couple of times, and I feel so badly for the people who sit through the whole process. This is going to make it much more visible, and they'll see their name up there and or the property that they own, and so that will accomplish that. So great. Public hearings, we'll have the ordinances for A1. You want to run through the please?
Sure. A1 is second reading on the amendment to our lots cleaning process for when there's debris on a particular property, and it reduces the time for compliance from 15 days to 7 days. I know that we've also got some interest in that item, and a concern that might be too short of a time. And Brian Ruiz did a great job of explaining that, the reduction from 15 to 7 days doesn't necessarily mean that a fine or the city's going to be out there on the 8th day to cut that lot and then start charging the property owner. That will simply begin the process of that process of notifying a contractor and getting a quote to go out and do the work. So there still will be time for a property owner to take the necessary action, we believe.
I think it's really important on this is to recognize all we're trying to do is tighten the clock on getting the process rolling. And in many cases, probably most, but certainly in many cases, these are repeat offenders anyway. So that means they may not have done what they could have done in terms of erecting a fence or creating some other disciplines that need to be in place to keep that from being an easy place to have dumping occur. So this does helps to accommodate what we desire to have happen, which is that we get serious more quickly about debris that's being dumped on lots. Any questions on that for our city attorney? All right, item B1, sir.
Item B1 is a resolution to establish a special assessment district in a neighborhood within the city. I think you may have all heard about this by now. The Heather Point neighborhood in the Wedgewood development. It's a neighborhood consisting of 36 lots. Heather Point Drive used to be a city street, and the stormwater system serving that street was also publicly owned. At some point, the homeowners association petitioned to make that private. Since that time, the stormwater system has experienced some significant structural deterioration to the point where some sinkholes are opening up, and I know that there's some residents that are worried about the structural integrity of their homes out there. Unfortunately, it's hard to get private financing for this type of a project. It's not related to any of the specific lots. It's related to subdivision infrastructure. So the homeowners association has not been able to get that private financing to do the necessary repairs to slow this deterioration process, as opposed to the city to serve in that capacity instead. The homeowners association has retained an engineer, Chastain Skillman, to do the design for the system, as well as develop construction estimates, bid documents, and they've done all that, put it out to bid. And the bottom line is, with the low bid that came in and some other additional expenses, they feel like they need $206,258 to finance this project. And so what this does is provide for an appropriation of money to do that, and then sets up a special assessment district whereby each of the lot owners will repay the city over a period of 10 years in the amount of $706 per year. And we're setting this up so that $706 will go on each of those lot owners' tax bills each year until repaid. So we are recommending that for approval.
Yeah, and I will comment, this was Commissioner Troll really brought this up originally in this whole process, and this is a great example of spending a year as a neighborhood trying to make this happen. Commissioner Reed?
Thank you, Mayor. I spoke to their representative and have been out with that subdivision, and I feel for them. And obviously, there is an interest factor connected to that too. Is there a fair statement?
Yes, 4%.
Okay. And of course, my biggest concern, and I think it's been satisfied, that we do have a vehicle to, if they don't pay through the FHOA, I guess they do have a potential to foreclose, don't they? Even though it comes through the county as a tax certificate type scenario.
If they don't pay, if any of the individual lot owners don't pay, a tax certificate would be issued. It wouldn't be a foreclosure. It'd go through the tax certificate process, ultimately lead to a tax sale.
Right. And of course, there again, the lien goes with the property, not with the individual owner. So if they sell the property, it still maintains that spot. So I'm comfortable with it personally, but that's my thoughts anyway.
Appreciate you bringing that up, Commissioner Reed. Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Palmer, a question about, I assume the project management is overseen by the HOA, that the city we're just essentially serving as the lender here.
That's a very good point. Absolutely. We're simply going to make payments to the contractor, but the contract's going to be between the HOA and the contractor. They're doing all the work. Some of these lines go fairly close to a couple of the houses out there, and we quite frankly didn't want to touch that. So we're simply providing the funds to make this happen, but the job's going to be done by them.
Thank you. And what is the precedent for this? Have we had similar situations in the past where we've stepped in and assisted in similar situations?
Yes, I would say the Orangewood Community Subdivision assessment is very similar to this. Those were private roads that, and the stormwater system out there was in bad shape, and we went in, made significant capital improvements to that, and collected a special assessment on the tax rolls over a period of 10 years, just like this one. And that they've now paid that off, so that was successfully concluded.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
This is a great mechanism for somebody to take an area like this and be able to do what needs to be done and have the city just help to facilitate. City Manager Strauss.
Yes, sir. I just want to highlight some of the conversation there, especially coming from Palmer, because it's going to be very important moving forward. That, you know, what really makes this one more unique is the fact that, as Palmer explained, it was public before it went private, because there are a lot of other, you know, subdivisions out there that are private where there was no ownership, you know, but from the public prior. And so that makes this one very unique, similar to a few of the others that we've, you know, had in the past. And so we just need to make sure that everybody understands that is the distinction here that makes this a little different, and why we have not made it a practice, you know, to loan money to privately owned subdivisions, and would not, you know, would consider it certainly if the commission chose to, but that it's not a practice that we're looking to establish on, you know, a regular basis.
I would just add that in addition to that, I think there's a more serious structural issue here than some of the other situations that we've seen.
Yeah, virtually almost all of those houses had flooding in their yards after heavy rains. Commissioner McCarley.
And I too spoke to their representative. I think most of us did yesterday, and I feel confident in the way it's happening because our city staff has sort of worked with them and give them good guidance. And, you know, as far as even the contractors that they're using, they're contractors that we've used at the city before too. So the infrastructure piece of it is really important. And I'm glad to see this happen so that they can take, it's just such an overwhelming project. So that they came together collectively and engaged as a citizen group, I think is really important. And I appreciate, Sean, that distinction between the two ways that we've done it before, that they were public before they were private.
All right, any other comments on this? Then let's move on. And we have nothing from the CRA or the city manager, which brings us on to the continuing Palmer Davis show of 6A1. Oh, excuse me, sir. We do have something from city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do not have anything on the agenda, but in order to maybe save some time at the commission meeting, need to just ask the commission about if we can think forward to the end of the month. We do have this year, New Year's Day falls on Friday, January the 1st, which would be an agenda study. That is a city holiday, and City Hall is closed. From what I'm told, historically, when that has occurred, we have moved the agenda study to the Monday morning in advance of the commission meeting in the afternoon, based on the way our schedule is set up now. So would just, you know, for advertising purposes and planning for staff, I would like to know if the commission would want to move the agenda study from that Friday on the holiday to Monday. And we would probably need to look at something mid-morning, because that Monday morning at 9 o'clock, we have the grand opening of the Fire Training Center. But mid-morning, we could plan for agenda study here at City Hall, if that's easier because of everyone being at the training center, you know, or, you know, if we needed to set something later morning for everyone to then attend virtually, but you'll be here in the afternoon for the commission meeting anyway. So just some guidance on whether you'd like to move the agenda study to that Monday.
We'll have a utility meeting at 1, will we not?
We will. So it would have to be mid-morning or late morning.
Or 11 o'clock agenda study, probably 10:30 would give some time for them in between to do something that might need to be adjusted before we get to our 3 o'clock meeting. Could everybody do 10:30 if we went straight from there? And Commissioner Reed.
Do we want to move it to Thursday, the 31st?
We considered that, that being New Year's Eve, though. I don't know how many people will be available for New Year's Eve.
We're out of town that week. Not that, I mean, you're certainly welcome to meet, but I wouldn't be able to make it.
Yeah, I'm out of town too that week.
Okay, and we'll all be here on that Monday. So good question, Commissioner Reed. Everybody in favor of Monday, and let's make it 10:30 so that we have a little bit of time on our side, and that'll move us from, okay, 10:30 it is, sir.
And then,
Thank
Mayor,
you.
would you want that to be an in-person agenda study for those who are attending the fire training center? Would it be easier to come back here for that, or do you want us to establish a virtual and everybody would just need to go to their locations after the training center?
I'd prefer to be virtual because that gives everybody the opportunity to do what they need to do. Most of us will probably be here. Commissioner Reed.
Will that be Scott's last meeting, and will Don be here that day then?
That's our plan.
Okay.
I'm not sure Scott will be here. I think he's going to be sworn in that day up in DC, but it will be Commissioner Selge's first meeting.
Yes.
So we'll plan our time with Scott on the 21st.
We can do that. And then we are planning on a swearing in on the 4th.
All right, very good. By the way, I thought Commissioner Selvage did such a great job at the Fallen Heroes ceremony yesterday. I know Commissioner Madden expressed that as well. And his remarks are so well prepared, they're so thoughtful, and they're pointed to the individual. He's just a really quiet giant, you know, and you can just feel it when he's performing. So I'm so grateful for his willingness to serve again in this period of time. Anything else at all, sir? You're finished, correct?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right, we will go to 6A1. Mr. Davis.
Okay, 6A1 is a conditional use approval for the Federal Bar, which I believe you're all familiar with, in the old Federal building where Mojo's is located as well. They have the proper state licenses to operate as a bar, but they do not have right now the city zoning necessary to operate primarily as a bar. So that's what this is about. And I'll turn it over to Teresa.
Good morning. Because this property is located in downtown, a conditional use is required for any type of bar or entertainment establishment, such as a banquet hall or, to use an antiquated term, a nightclub. So this property, which is located on the north side of what we know is the Federal building adjacent to Moho Federal, was initially established as a restaurant, and it does hold a food service license from the state of Florida. When the establishment first opened, it also held an alcoholic beverage license from the state with the designation as a restaurant. And with that designation, the state required that at least 51% of the gross revenue from the establishment be derived from food and non-alcoholic beverages. After the issuance of that license to Federal Bar, there was an audit that was conducted by the state in which they found that they were not meeting that minimum threshold of food sales. So as a result, they were not able to maintain that special restaurant license for alcoholic beverages, which still provided for beer, wine, and liquor, just had that minimum threshold. So they then applied for another license, what is generally referred to as a quota license, which doesn't have the same requirement for food service, but again, allows for beer, wine, and liquor sales. So they applied for that license and were granted that license by the state. And then as a result of that, and knowing that they did not meet the minimum food sales, they came in and applied for the conditional use for a bar. And that threshold of 51% is also consistent with our own land development code, which defines a bar in the same way, sorry, a restaurant in the same way, and defines a bar as an establishment devoted during any period of time to serving predominantly alcoholic beverages. So while Federal Bar continues to maintain food service, their food sales fluctuate from time to time, and they're not consistent at the 51%. But they will still continue with those food sales. So looking at their overall site plan, the facility is about 3,800 square feet, and they can accommodate 317 patrons inside and then approximately 100 patrons outside. You'll see here in this photo, they do have some outdoor seating on the north side of the building. They do have a commercial kitchen, and that kitchen comprises approximately 375 square feet, or roughly 10% of the total floor area. This is another view of that outdoor seating area. This is looking south down the alley behind the building. And in reviewing this request, the City Commission is required to look at certain criteria within downtown. And there's 5 of those criteria. The first one being whether or not there will be a higher concentration resulting from the issuance of the conditional use of bars within a particular area. So looking at other bars within downtown, this will not result in a concentration, at least on Tennessee Avenue, as the primary street frontage for bars within downtown is Kentucky. So that's where the primary concentration is. One of the other criterion is whether or not the establishment is in proximity to sensitive land uses. So it's not close to any churches or schools. So it is good, set back a good distance from St. Joseph's Catholic Church and also from All Saints Episcopal Church. It is in proximity to Munn Park, which is a public gathering space. But again, there's not a higher concentration of bars along Tennessee that would negatively impact its proximity to the park. Looking at another criterion is whether or not the size or scale of the proposed use is appropriate. Again, given the overall size of the facility and the commercial kitchen, the staff and Planning and Zoning Board felt that it is appropriate. And moving on to impacts, external impacts, there is a criterion dealing with how likely it is that the establishment will be able to manage negative impacts. And one of the ways we measure that is looking at a background check of the operators. And in this case, background check with FDLE didn't reveal any criminal activity related to the operator. We also look at police calls for service. And for this establishment, we looked at a list of calls for service over the 2-year period that they have been in operation. We also looked at those for 5 other downtown bars. And what you'll see on this screen is a list of those calls for service for Federal Bar. And when we look at that 2-year period and looking at other establishments within downtown, this is not out of the ordinary in terms of the number of calls for service. You will see that first one at the top there might be concerning, and that says shots fired. So I don't believe that was in the establishment. That was something that happened outside of the establishment. And, you know, we tend to look at those that are more violent in nature, like, you know, disturbances or fights. You can see some of these unwanted guests where someone had to be removed. But again, these are pretty common for establishments downtown, with the exception of that first one. And then looking at support from the LDDA, this did go before the LDDA and they did vote to recommend approval. But at that time, they were conditioning it upon the applicant providing all necessary application materials to city staff, which they did. And then the final criterion is whether or not there are any that the City Commission seems appropriate to consider in a particular case. In this instance, there were no objections received from the public at the public hearing. And with that, the staff and Planning and Zoning Board did recommend approval with conditions. These conditions, again, are typical of what we've been applying or what's been applied to past bars that were approved in downtown. And it looks at applying the conditional use for the benefit of the applicant only, so that if there is a change in ownership, that there would be a need to come back to the City Commission for approval. It looks at the impacts with regard to calls for service, again, and code enforcement. So if there are any more than one violation of the provisions of this conditional use ordinance, or any 5 code violations or calls for service that result in incident reports within a 12-month period, that is the grounds for revoking the conditional use. And then finally, this just states that these conditions are cumulative in nature, so that if one or more of these is not met, it's grounds for revoking the conditional use. And I'm available for any questions you may have.
What were the most concerning comments by planning and zoning on this?
There weren't really. There was not much discussion about this. In fact, there was no one in attendance for this item from the public other than the applicant himself. And there was not discussion on this item.
Commissioner Reed, you have a question?
Thank you. Teresa, I have several questions. It's going to remain food and beverage?
Yes, it is.
So they will not have smoking inside. Is that a fair statement?
As long as they have that food service license, that is correct.
So that'll be a 3 COP or 4 COP?
They have a 4 COP.
Okay. And then are there restrictions on hours of operation?
There's no restriction on hours of operation, no.
What is our typical operation hours on bars downtown?
So as far as conditional uses, we don't have any restrictions, and I would have to recall back what we have in the general city code about hours of operation. I believe it is
PM, I believe it's 5. 2 a.m., excuse me.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on this one? Teresa, thank you very much. That was very comprehensive and helpful.
Mayor Mutz?
Yes, Commissioner Matt.
So I only see her screen. I don't know if you can see me, but I did want to ask Teresa, I certainly see that you're taking this, contextually as its own property, doing the police report, doing all of this due diligence. Mm-hmm. Is there a threshold at which our downtown, there is a percentage or number of bars that we're allowed according to our land code? And then secondly, I know that, it seems to be that a lot of our establishments, really are determined to be more family friendly. If you think about our breweries and, the different, the rec room and things seem to have a more family friendly or another activity besides just a bar. But I just was curious, I know that it looked, when I was reading the attachments, it looked quite comprehensive, for something I felt like was already a bar, to go through this process, to make sure that it was, appropriate. Could you comment on, just kind of going forward, do we have opportunity for more bars in downtown? Would they have to be more restaurants? Is there a certain number that we're allowed around Munn Park? Other than just each one individually, how far it is from the park, how far it is from a church or school, those things that you talked about.
Right. So as far as the number of bars, at one time there was a limit of, I believe it was no more than 5 within downtown. That numerical limit was removed in favor of having these review criteria so that you could look at each establishment on its own and not give preference to any one particular applicant that came in. So, if you're first in, you get approved, and then there's 5 and that's it. So Currently, there's no numerical limit. It's just looking at, again, what is that concentration within a particular area, and making sure that the external impacts are mitigated for.
So could you say that if there were folks who were interested in opening a bar downtown, that they would have kind of an idea of where maybe there was already a concentration and not bother with buying a building in that area, instead go to, do you have information, like that for potential entrepreneurs or businesses?
So what we do have is when we have potential establishments coming to us, we provide them with this general criteria that have been applied to the other bars, so they have an expectation of what the conditions are. We don't guide them to any particular area because in at least the recent past, there's been kind of a more liberal approach and viewpoint of having bars and entertainment establishments within downtown. I would say that one of the things that's key is that if it is a bar, and I think this is something that the LGDA looks at as well, that there is some other component to it. So for example, rec room, they have some other activities that are going on in that establishment other than just the service of alcoholic beverages. In the case of Federal Bar here, they have food service and they also have some live performances. So it's an entertainment function as well. So yeah, we don't direct them to any particular area. I think historically, though, the core of downtown has been, kind of like the entertainment district. And I think a lot of times those businesses kind of like feed off one another when you have those all in one area. And it might not be a bad thing to have them concentrated in a central location. That way it's kind of like, if you have something out on the outskirts of downtown, it's kind of a little bit more remote. This way it's more visible. There's a lot more eyes on the street, a lot more activity going on.
I think what's good about this also, Commissioner Madden, and those are excellent questions, is that it gives us a sense of feel and the ability to kind of push those things so they're not in a concentration where it's bar when you walk by, which so far has been pretty effective. And most of those purchases would be contingent on the approval. If they're requiring land, they're not going to acquire it unless they can reach that approval first. And unless they already owned it and they were trying to develop it into something differently. But I like the fact that it gives us the ability to kind of create a spread / allow for a concentration in an area like we have in Kentucky as well. And we don't have an open container law, which is I'm personally in favor of not having on an ongoing basis. And we certainly don't have any of the roving carts kinds of things that we see in Savannah or Charleston or those kinds of places that it kind of accentuate that. And this gives us the ability to have family-friendly areas that we can walk people through without having a showcase out in the middle of the street or people drinking as they're walking down the street. So probably a pretty healthy tension for us, at least from my perspective.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Teresa. I guess, that was kind of, part of my point is certainly, in my opinion, I felt like Federal Bar was already a bar, so I was surprised at the scrutiny, that it was given, but I understand that it needs to go through the fair process like everyone else. And I was going to also say, when we're now extending our market on Saturdays and we have events like First Friday that we're also pairing with the Snow Fest down at the Promenade, I would hope that because there are several bars right there on, near Munn Park in that area, Linksters and Molly's and, Revival and Federal, that we wouldn't necessarily have that become, the only place where we have bar activity. To your point, Mayor, you want to feel like you could be family friendly in all parts of downtown. And then, there's areas down by Kentucky, Massachusetts, leading down to Yard on Mass, and then going west over to Swan Brewing. So I just was curious if there was, just like we master plan the downtown and we're trying to do a west-east divide, a bridge. I understand Teresa's point that we don't want it necessarily a bar kind of in a dimly lit, far off place that could be more suitable, to nefarious activity. But I do think that spreading it throughout the area, keeps retail and restaurants and more family friendly things all throughout the downtown, so it doesn't become a concentrated area, like a little, New Orleans or something. So that was a lot of the rationale for my questioning. Thank you.
That's why a lot of people go to New Orleans. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Teresa, I have one other question. In reference to Munn Park, does the 500 feet, is that part of the criteria for Munn Park for 500 feet?
There's no required separation from parks and bars. The only separation requirement is for churches and schools.
Right. And of course, we're going to have a big building vacant in the near future on Main Street with the Estroff building, and that may be repurposed for something in the near future. So that might be something to consider. But of course, they're not making any physical alterations to the interior building, are they? Looks like it's the same floor plan from what I'm used to seeing there.
It's exactly the same as it's been functioning. So that this will just basically recognize how it's been operating. Again, with the combination of food services and alcoholic beverage and entertainment uses.
Yeah, thanks.
Excellent. All right, so, and by the way, Commissioner Reed, I certainly appreciate your excellent real estate questions that you always help guide us through, because you teach certainly me all along the way, and I'm grateful for that. Yeah, and Teresa, obviously, you provide that on an ongoing basis. All right, if there are no other questions on that, let's go on to the next item, sir.
Okay, thank you. The next item is an ordinance that would officially annex several properties into the boundaries of the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District, and would also subject those properties to LAMTAD's taxing authority. This is something that we do from time to time. The process that was originally set up by Polk County actually requires the LAMTAD board to first adopt a resolution providing for the annexation, and then for the city commission to actually, if it's in the city limits of the city of Lakeland, to adopt an ordinance ratifying that resolution. As part of LAMTAD's process, they require the consent of the property owner. So with respect to all of these properties that are to be annexed, the property owner has consented to inclusion in the boundaries and the associated ad valorem tax that goes along with that. And Chuck is pulling up some maps, I believe, to show you exactly where these properties are.
Thank you, Mr. Barnaby. We appreciate you joining us.
Good morning, everybody. And as Mr. Davis said, from time to time, we have development activity on portions on tracts of land that are inside the city limits but are outside the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District. And since right around 1980, LAMTAD, as we call it, or the Citrus Connection, they've levied up to a $500,000 ad valorem tax for transit services and operate as a completely separate agency from the city of Lakeland or Polk County government. And so we've got policies, and let me see here, make sure everybody can see my screen here. But essentially, the comprehensive plan allows us to work with developers to require annexations into the transit district if they need wastewater services, or if the lands have been annexed into the city of Lakeland and again are outside of the transit district. And so really the nexus here is that for projects that generate substantial amounts of traffic, or in close proximity to transit routes or planned transit routes, we want to make sure that they're paying their share into the transit fund or into the transit district, primarily for operations, staffing costs, those type of things like the Citrus Connect. So the properties that are the subject of the current annexation package total about just under 560 acres. They include the Hawthorne Mill property, south of Pipkin Road, really between Pipkin Road and Ewell Road, immediately west of Riverstone, and that was a recent annexation as well. Hawthorne Mill is expected to have ultimately just over 1,500 dwelling units and has a new owner. They are wanting to come through now for a mass grading permit and want to begin submitting plans for staff review. So that project is certainly off and running. Nearby, and actually adjacent to another recent annexation that we've had is Gresham Farms. We've got the new public shopping center, which is under construction at the northeast corner of West Pipkin Road and County Line Road. Adjacent to that to the north are two residential tracts. One is currently planned for about 80 single-family homes by Southern Homes. And there's a property to the west, adjacent to County Line Road, which is scheduled for somewhere around 300 multifamily units. That's right now just has straight zoning, and we haven't seen no solid development proposals on that portion. But definitely there is going to be a major residential component adjacent to the new Publix. And so as part of that, as part of the planning process, we wanted to get those properties into the transit district at this time as well. And there is a small out parcel, which kind of is a quirk in the planning processes and ownerships out there, is owned by the same developer, but not part of the ongoing plat that's under review. So in talking with Ben Darby, the counsel for the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District, we felt it was just better and cleaner to go ahead and bring that in as a separate resolution. But ultimately, everything out there at Gresham Farms and that overall mixed-use development would be brought into the transit district. It's also worth noting at this point that the Citrus Connection now serves this site. I think it's the red line number 2 to this area, and Publix, as part of the ongoing shopping center development, they're putting an on-site transit stop within the shopping center that would be accessible to all the residents in the surrounding properties and out parcels as well. So transit is definitely being developed as part of this overall mixed-use center. Jumping to the north side of town, there's about 2 acres south of Griffin Road that is being developed as kind of goes under 2 different names. One is Lakeland Auto Body, the other is Caliber Collision. They're the same project, the same development. We're bringing this into the project now as a concurrency requirement, and again as an area that has been annexed into the city. It's outside of the transit district, and is actually adjacent to 2 19-acre tracts that were annexed into the district back in September that aren't reflected in the property appraiser's office information yet for the Swan Lake Village and the Reserve at Lakeland Square projects. And so this is immediately adjacent to 2 other tracts that have recently been brought into the transit district. The last one today is about 1.3 acres in Parkway Corporate Center, south of Brainfield Road, west of South Pipkin Road, and it's the K.A. Masonry site. This one was originally submitted to the Citrus Connection back, I think it was in 2017. And so as we noted with the September annexations, we're also clearing out a backlog of a number of projects that have been kind of waiting in the wings and are now being brought in as a package. Between this annexation package and the ones from September, we will be bringing in almost 917 acres in this calendar year into the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District. And so one of the things that's important in terms of our area is we do have that ad valorem tax base that's available to support transit service long term, and we're not having to rely solely on grants or contributions from local governments to be able to continue to operate a transit system in the Lakeland area. So with that background, I'll certainly stand for any questions that the commissioners have.
Commissioner McCarley, do you have anything you'd like to add to this at all, as our chairman of LAMTID?
No, but I always appreciate Scott. I will say, Scott, I'm sorry. I have a cold, so I'm a little loopy today. But Chuck, I don't know why I called you Scott. I appreciate Chuck every time he presents to us. And I will tell you that the team at Citrus Connection said recently that we don't need more people we don't need Chuck to keep doing things for everything around the county. We need Chuck to make more Chucks so that we can have such good concurrency around the county, and especially with transit, because he's just such a leader and is so on top of all of this, and we just truly appreciate him and all of his diligence and work. But I do think for public transit, this is really important to continue to find ways that we can support it, because for so many families, it's a necessity. And although we are historically an agriculture society, using public transit and having that ability will help our students. It'll help connect people to their jobs, especially when we go into this post-pandemic recovery. So I think it's vitally important. I'm a big supporter of transit, and thanks, Chuck, for sharing all that. I don't know if anybody has any other questions, but I do think this is a smart way to make sure that we're incorporating it into our planning.
I would echo that, and I would comment, the only question I have is the old Gresham Farm area delay that we're not doing at the present time. Can I understand the rationale about why Ben does not want to do that at the present time?
Actually, this brings in everything within Gresham Farms. It was just really done under two different phases. What was interesting is that without having a PUD out there, we've really had to work with the individual owners as they've come through for separate development approvals. And so it got kind of split up a little bit, but ultimately everything in Gresham Farms with this action will be brought in. So we'll be good from both the retail and the residential side.
Very good. Anything else? Any other questions by anyone? Chuck, thank you for your thorough explanation. And, the other thing we want to continue to encourage citizens on, we want the mass transit system to be something that's more viable for a lot of broader use of groups of people than we may typically think about today as we transition to less vehicles. And certainly as those homes get occupied, and many of them will be occupied by one-car owner millennials, that's a need and a continuing growth pressure. And to that end, Citrus Connection works on the buses' quality, condition, the Wi-Fi capabilities and all those things to make them more viable units to use. All right. Thank you very much, Chuck, for that. I see no other questions, so we'll go on to resolutions B2, because one will be lots and clearing that we'll approve from having done the equalization hearing.
Okay, resolution B2 is a resolution related to the airport. The city previously received an FAA grant for improvements to taxiways A, B, and C. And now under the 2020 Federal CARES Act, the FAA has increased that grant to cover from 90% to now 100% of that project. Previously, they were only covering 90%, and we had an state FDOT grant in place that was going to provide 5% of that funding as well, in the amount of $185,000. Because the FAA grants now covering 100% of that, we're going to simply repurpose the monies that were coming from the FDOT to some other aspects of that project that did not qualify for the FAA grant. So that's what this resolution is doing. Gene Conrad's on the meeting, so he can answer any other questions you have.
Are there any from commissioners? Good morning, Mr. Conrad. Great to see you, sir. All right, seeing none, let's go to C2.
Okay, C2 is a professional services agreement with DRMP for construction, engineering, and inspection services related to the Lakeland Park Drive Connector project. As you know, we just completed acquiring the necessary right-of-way for that from a couple of the different entities out there. So we're now ready to move forward with that. We did an RFQ, and there were two respondents. DRMP was the respondent that was selected. They are going to provide the required services for not to exceed fee of $524,000 $623. Those services are going to include, evaluating the various bidders, obviously all the inspection required for the project, as-built, certification of the project, preparation or review of payment requests, schedule issues, and that type of thing. And I see Greg's on the line, so he can elaborate further.
Greg, could you please?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. We put out the RFQ for the CEI services. This is typical of any road construction project that we have. We did similar RFQs for the North Wabash project, as well as we use CEI services at the US 92 and Wabash intersection projects, both which are underway now. This will be paid by actual hours used. So what we've provided is an estimate of the $524,000 and some change. And we anticipate the projects take 9 months. DRMP will be involved with both the inspection as well as coordination with utility companies that have facilities to be relocated, as well as working with our stakeholders that are adjacent to the project, such as the golf course and Fields Motor Cars and Cracker Barrel and various hotels. We are, in fact, today began advertising for construction bids for this project. They're due January the 5th. So I anticipate hopefully bringing a contract recommended for award in March, no later than March, and then starting construction in April.
And I want to compliment you on the project with respect to the inclusion of the 10-foot pathway, the lighting that makes that whole corridor very, very usable on a long-term basis. That's great.
Good. That's the standard we're trying to use on most of our projects going forward. I know with the North Wabash, we do have sidewalks on both sides as well as lighting, and we're trying to think of both not only the vehicle users, but the pedestrians and bicyclists as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Questions from commissioners? For Mr. James. Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Greg, I know you told us this a while back, but the timeline for that construction, what are we thinking for that?
For this project, we're looking at starting in April, which is the beginning of the slow season for golfing. And then that will help us work around the golf course. But we're looking at about 9 months. So we should wrap up probably either December of 21 or January of 22, somewhere in that time frame.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. What is scary is that now that's starting to sound like normal when we talk about December of 22. Or January.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, and appreciate your input on that.
Thank you.
With that takes us to utilities, and we have a resolution, and I imagine, Ms. Sirianni, there you are. Thank you. Can you cover that, please?
Yeah, the resolution actually is the fuel rate charge, which will be presented by, I think, Tori Bombard on Monday at Monday's Utility Committee. The second item that we have is an agreement with PowerCon Corporation. This is for a switchgear enclosure for the Highland City substation that will help improve and automate load transfer. In late August, the city issued invitation to bid. We received bids back from 6 contractors or vendors. The lowest, most responsible bidder upon evaluation was PowerCon Corporation for a base bid price of $333,950. Pursuant to this agreement, PowerCon will provide the switchgear enclosure. It'll include all labor, materials, and delivery to the substation. And once that's received, Lakeland Electric staff will be installing the switchgear enclosure itself. Once staff reviewed the bid, there were some adjustments made that added, these modifications added approximately $2,425 to the base bid. which brought the total cost to $336,375. And that is included in Lakeland Electric's FY21 budget. And I believe Sean Yab is available to answer. I know there may be some technical questions with regard to the switchgear enclosure itself.
Well, I have them, so this is an opportunity to be educated. Can we walk through what the switchgear does as it makes its voltage change and how the enclosure protects it?
I see Sean Yab is on there. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, I'm here. Okay. Yes, this is Sean Yap. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The switchgear, actually, we have 2 transformer in the substation. That's our standards. And most standard substations have similar buses, for example, the 12 kV buses, that will give us the feasibility to transfer load from one bus to the other bus. So right now at Highland City, we have 2 different bus designs. So we have one indoor bus, which is a switchgear. The other one is the outdoor bus, which is the outdoor structure. So we don't have a way of transferring loads from one bus to another. So for this addition of the switchgear would give us the ability to transfer loads, which is customers, from one bus to the other bus. And that where, as far as reliability goes, system reliability, restoring power outages, so that will greatly reduce the outage time of the customer that the customer experience. But we also have the capability to automatically transfer customers from one bus to the other one whenever there's an outage on one transformer.
So it gives us flexibility and not to be so vulnerable to just one source of supply by bringing over something else. Excellent.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. We appreciate little bits of learning along the way. Other questions by commissioners? All right, seeing none, appreciate that, Sean. And the next one, Mr. Young.
I'll address the next one. This is the long-awaited purchase and sale agreement with OUC for some land that's jointly owned by the city and OUC out at McIntosh. Back in 1978, the city and OUC entered into a joint ownership agreement for the operation of Unit 3 and purchased some additional land to support that operation. The city owns 60% of that land, and OUC owns 40% of that land. Shortly after we entered into that joint operating agreement, the city then decided to build Unit 5 on 19 acres on that jointly owned land and entered into a verbal agreement with OUC that we would go ahead and buy their interest out so that we totally own the land that we're building Unit 5 on. That never was able to be consummated because of some pricing and environmental liability issues, and just kind of sat in the background for quite a while. Then in 2019, the city built gas turbine 2 on 2 acres of that same jointly owned land. That's, I believe, more commonly known as the Calpine unit. So when we did that restarted the negotiations related to this land, and the parties have finally reached an agreement on the price to purchase all land, approximately 81 acres of land out there, of jointly owned land, at a purchase price of $482,358. The city is going to go ahead and accept environmental responsibility for that land dating back to when we actually constructed Unit 5 on that land. And we've also been the sole operator all the assets out there as well. So that makes sense. And I guess the only other thing of note related to this contract would be that the party's going to split the closing costs equally. So I think Ron Creeman's on the line if you have any technical questions.
Commissioner Reed, go ahead.
Thank you. Palmer, is this $480,000? Is that the 40%? Is that the 100%?
That will purchase their 40%. 40%. We already own 60%.
Okay.
I think this is a wonderful transaction to get behind us. Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Where does the $400,000, where's that coming from, Palmer?
It's in Lakeland Electric's budget, but Ron could probably address that better than I can.
That's what I was getting at. Was this budgeted?
No, it was not budgeted, unfortunately. So I believe in the next city commission meeting, we're going to have to ask for an appropriation to purchase it. We had planned to purchase this. I mean, I expected this to come before you guys last year, and then we ran into quite a few problems resolving it. And I want to thank Palmer for working very diligently to make it happen, because I created the deal, but he did all the work.
I appreciate your patience.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed.
Ron, what kind of environmental issues do you anticipate?
I don't anticipate any environmental issues. Underneath the land is some clay. I mean, what this was a long time ago was ponds that were holding water. And actually, it was where we were growing hyacinth to sell for cattle food, but that never panned out. Matter of fact, when I came to work here in 1987, they'd already stopped doing that. So, so the only thing down there is a clay liner. I don't expect there to be any issues with that, but you never know, right?
So it's nothing contamination. It's just strictly the subsoil conditions.
That's correct.
Okay.
And Ron, we did borings, did we not, when we did Unit 5, ahead of installing that for environmental?
Yes, we do borings every time we get ready to build to look for things. The clay is there. It shouldn't be a problem, but that was the one thing I was worried about in the long run. This was just holding water, and that's been going a long time. And so there should be no environmental issues other than what the units can do to it that we have over top of them.
Any other questions by commissioners? All right. Well, thank you to the team for getting this on the agenda and being able to be in a position of getting it done. Sorry, that takes us into to completion of the city attorney and to the mayor, members of the city commission for comments. And so you can do your agenda study comments now that you'd like to get done before this weekend, and then again when we have our commission meeting. Who would like to begin with any comments they'd like to make? All right, Commissioner Reed.
I thought for sure Stephanie or Sarah would go, but nobody raised their hand. So are we going to have any kind of thing for Scott?
We will work that into our 21st meeting, and we can certainly have any other discussion you'd like to have beyond that. Okay. But if we want to keep it kind of fun for him. Snowfest is this weekend, so don't forget that. This is 6 to 9 on Lake Mare. If you've been talking this up around town a little bit, some people aren't aware yet. And so I would say it's a good thing to maybe post about, look at Mr. Cook has something. In fact, Mr. Cook, why don't you just do a little public relations piece on this for us now?
There we go. We have Snowfest, of course. You mentioned that, Mr. Mayor, at Lake Mare from 6 to 9. It's going to be awesome. We have gateways into the area. The admission is suggested a canned food or non-perishable food item for Visti and the senior orphans. It's a walk through the snow. How often do you get to do that in Florida? We're blessed that it's presented by Audi, who's assisting us. We're going to have a book giveaway from the Junior League of Greater Lakeland. We've got arts and crafts and vendors and food trucks on either end of the Main Street walking area that we've set up. It should be a lot of fun for children of all ages this holiday season.
And socially distance along the way, correct?
Yes, sir. So we're strongly suggesting masks be worn and socially distance takes place. We'll have masks available for those individuals that may come to one of our entranceway areas that don't have masks. We'll have masks available.
This will be both Friday night and Saturday night, right?
That is correct, sir. The event is both nights, Friday and Saturday, from 6 to 9 p.m. We are expecting a little rain tonight, but according to Steve Jervy, it's just going to be a little mist, hopefully in Lakeland about 6 o'clock. So it will go on. If it's misting, if it's terrible weather, we have a plan B, but right now it looks as if the event's going to go on, and we have a beautiful night for Saturday night. So I don't want anyone to be discouraged. Please come out both nights if you'd like. Again, Friday and Saturday night, Lake Mirror from 6 to 9 p.m.
The misting just adds authenticity to the event for those who love winter on Friday night. All right, Commissioner Reed.
Kevin had answered my question. I hadn't heard what time it was going to be, and so he did address that. So I have no questions. Thank you.
Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Kevin. That was a good update. The McLeod kids are excited about this, that we will be out there Saturday night, probably pretty easy to spot. So if you're there, please say hello. But I do want to thank staff for doing this. I know there are a lot of families that are excited about being able to get out and do something holiday related. And I know it takes a lot of work. These things just don't happen. So thank you for the work that's gone into it. I think it's a great thing for the city and the community. And hope to see you out there Saturday.
City Manager Rouse.
Mr. Mayor, I didn't have anything, but I would just echo the same thing Commissioner McLeod just said. As the commissioners are aware, we talked about this some time ago. We were even looking at whether or not it needed to be a drive-through, in personal vehicles to make something happen that's going to be great for the community. So appreciate all the staff that has worked so hard for this, and we hope it's a good turnout. Should be a good time, and there'll be a lot of special visitors in red suits to be seen at the event. So we're looking forward to it.
Any other comments from commissioners? If not, we are adjourned.